First and foremost, I would like to give my gratitude for my previous Elden Ring video, as I was not expecting it to receive as much attention as it did, and I've had some great conversations down in the comments, which has been incredible. I love interacting with all of you on these subjects. Though today I am actually going to be discussing information relating to the Helphen, which was pointed out to me by a very astute commenter, so thank you very much for that. Anyway, let's get on with learning about the Helphen. I was once of the mindset that ideas could be generated out of pure effort or imagination. However, having learned about creative psychology during my time in university, creativity is much more akin to restructuring or reformatting of an existing idea, such as how the concept behind airplanes was driven by examining existing knowledge of how other creatures, particularly birds, could fly. While definitions of creativity can vary greatly, one within psychology that I enjoy defines creativity as the tendency to generate or recognize ideas, alternatives, or possibilities that may be useful in solving problems, communicating with others, and entertaining ourselves and others. A hallmark of creativity is remixing existing concepts or ideas into new structures or wholly new concepts, such as the toaster oven, which simply combine the concepts of a toaster and an oven, though this is a very simple example admittedly. This particular aspect of creativity is known as combinatorial creativity, as it includes the exploration of unfamiliar combinations of familiar ideas. Especially in the modern world, combinatorial creativity is frequently used, as many simpler ideas and inventions have led humans to the point in time we currently inhabit, which has then sought to further expand upon our past creative endeavors as humans. I have long held the conviction that no creative work is created in a vacuum, and I believe this to be especially true for such large creative works like Elden Ring, as there are likely many direct and indirect sources of inspiration for the mythos of Elden Ring, and it likely isn't only influenced by Miyazaki and Martin, but also influenced by everyone else who has played a part in crafting the final product that we see. As such, I prefer to look at these lore topics not only from the perspective of the game itself, but also from the perspective of Elden Ring being FromSoft's most monumental achievement, and how this may relate to mythological and theological sources. For this video, I will primarily focus on Norse mythology as it relates to the Helphen, though I would also like to further investigate connections between Elden Ring and Celtic mythology in the near future, as Celtic mythology is essentially the foundation for Norse myths. Recently, the existence of an underworld, spirit world, afterlife, or whatever you decide to call it, has gained more traction in the discussion of the mysteries surrounding the lore of Elden Ring. There is little information on what the Helphen actually is, with the primary source in-game being the Helphen's steeple, which is described as being representative of the lamplight that guides particular souls in the Helphen, specifically those who have died in battle, with the verbatim text reading as follows: greatsword patterned after the black steeple of the Helphen, the lampwood which guides the dead of the spirit world. The lamplight is similar to grace in appearance, only it is said that it can only be seen by those who met their death in battle. The sword is dropped by a tibia mariner south of Castle Sol and northwest of Snow Valley Ruins Overlook, and is equipped with a unique skill called the Ruinous Ghost Flame, a weapon skill that does not actually inflict fire damage, as the flame is cold, though it certainly looks as though it would inflict fire damage. Interestingly, a deathrite bird can also be found nearby the tibia mariner in the Helphen steeple, which could relate to the past function and purpose of the deathrite birds. In the time when there was no Erd tree, death was burned in ghost flame. Death birds were the keepers of that fire. The birds are graveyard fire keepers. It is said they rake out their ashen remains of the dead from their kilns. Taking these descriptions into account, it's clear that deathrite birds once served the purpose of burning death, though whether this means actually burning the essence of death, such as how death is physically connected to the rune of death, is unclear, as this could also refer to simply burning the dead to send them on their way to the Helphen. Other connections between the deathrite birds and the Helphen steeple are the two branch sword talismans, with the red-feathered branch sword's description reading, a talisman adorned with red feathers, once used in ancient death rituals, raises attack power when HP is low. The heart sings when one draws close to death, and a glorious end awaits those who cling so tenaciously to life. Moreover, the blue-feathered branch sword's description reads, a talisman adorned with blue feathers, once used in ancient death rituals, raises defense when HP is low. The heart sings when one draws close to death, and thus does one cling so tenaciously to life, to render up a death worth offering. Both of these talismans can be dropped by deathrite birds, and both of the talismans bear a striking resemblance to that of the Helphen steeple, which only strengthens the relationship between the Helphen and deathrite birds. It's quite fitting that these talismans would raise your attack and defense, respectively, when your health drops below a certain point, which harkens back to the final line of each description. The heart sings when one draws close to death, and thus does one cling so tenaciously to life, with the blue-feathered talisman adding, to render up a death worth offering, at the end. This line is significant, as it further demonstrates that those who try to cling to life, essentially those who push forward no matter the odds, are to receive a more glorious afterlife, much like the concept of the Norse Valhalla, or Hall of the Fallen. While this line is significant and quite clearly is a direct reference to warriors dying in battle and entering Valhalla, I would like to point out that this is not actually a condition to enter Valhalla, at least not one that can directly be found in any Norse mythology. In fact, the idea of those who fall in battle entering Valhalla is actually a more modern addition to the mythos, with a 13th century scholar Snorri Sturluson having added this interpretation in his collection of Norse myths titled the Prose Edda, which is not to be confused with the Poetic Edda, which, much like the Iliad and the Odyssey, the Poetic Edda is the primary source of Norse myths, similar to the Iliad and the Odyssey being the primary source of Greek myths. Moreover, Snorri Sturluson contradicted himself several times in the Prose Edda, discussing how the god Balder entered Hell after his death, despite Sturluson himself previously having said those who die in battle should enter Valhalla. The reason this matters is because Sturluson recounts the tale of Balder, and despite his own clarifications about Valhalla previously, Balder ends up going to Hell, even though he died in a horrifically gruesome battle. The guy couldn't even follow his own rules. Though this is likely due to Sturluson being a Christian scholar living in a time in which many Norse traditions relating to their mythology were no longer practiced, and his interpretation of Norse myths is typically regarded as being anachronistic, and an effort on his part to reconcile Norse traditions with the origins of Christianity, as it was also Sturluson who depicted the goddess Hel and the underworld Hel in a similar light to the Christian Hell, despite there actually being very few similarities between the two. I'm bringing attention to this so I don't have to continue distinguishing between the Poetic and Prose Edda when I discuss the Helphen, which shares connections both with the original Poetic Edda and with the interpretations of the Prose Edda. I also thought it pertinent to mention, as most people view Norse mythology through the lens of the Prose Edda, which explains some of the choices made in-game, though it is arguably not drawing from the correct mythological sources, and I want to demonstrate how these concepts merge and change over time, especially how they merge with other aspects of Norse mythology, which can provide an excellent example of combinatorial creativity. Let us start with the name of the underworld, the Helphen. The most obvious connection between the Helphen and Hell is of course the name, as the Helphen includes the word Hell and even uses a singular L. Moreover, in Norse mythology, Hell is invariably referred to as Helheim, a name that bears a striking similarity to Helphen, though it is altered just enough to be considered a separate word and location. To clear up any confusion, the word Hell means hidden, and comes from Halio, meaning concealed place. Thus, the term Hell does not necessarily denote a torturous afterlife. It simply refers to a location that is hidden, typically underground. In fact, in Norse tradition, there is no consistent fate of the dead, nor did they have the concept of damnation and salvation, hence why the Prose Edda has an inaccurate depiction of Hell being a place of immense pain and torture, as Hell is the catch-all underworld for the Norse, and was typically viewed in a neutral or even positive light. There are no souls of the damned, so to speak, in Hell or Helheim, as virtually everyone wound up there unless you were to die in other specific locations or were chosen to enter Valhalla by Odin and his Valkyries. To illustrate this point, in Norse tradition, it was also believed that those who died at sea would enter the underwater home of the giantess Ran, and live on underwater. Similarly, other forms of spirit realms or underworlds in Norse mythology are not typically related to good or evil actions one commits, but more so where they died, though the Norse believed their people continued to live on in these realms in some capacity similar to when they were alive, such as eating, drinking, partying, and managing relationships. It simply was the next step in their journey. Hell is not bliss nor torment, but rather a continuation of life in many ways. As previously stated, the Helphen not only draws upon Hell as a source, though it also appears to take some inspiration from the Prose Edda, as the Helphen steeple claims only those who met their end in battle can be guided by the lamplight in the Helphen. And while it may not seem important at first, I believe the color of this grace-like substance is likely red, which may point to a connection between the Helphen and the Rune of Death, or perhaps it's a more obscure reference to one of the outer gods, namely the Formless Mother. The Rune of Death is associated with a red and black flame-like aura, and while this could connect to the Helphen, as it is the realm of the dead, the red glow used to summon skeletons from their graves by enemies such as tibia mariners lacks the same coloration, as the aura that surrounds the undead when they rise is a more solid red, and is more akin to the blood magic used by Mohg in the Formless Mother. The red aura that summons the undead may also relate to the concept of the guiding lamp in the Helphen, as perhaps only those who have died in battle and been deemed worthy warriors can be raised from the dead to battle once again. While this is just speculation, I think there could be some truth in this, as the red aura is particularly given to the undead summoned from the ground, which relates quite well to the Prose Edda version of Valhalla, in which the gruesome and painful death is required to enter Valhalla and dine with Odin. Perhaps the Helphen is actually a merging of Hell and Valhalla, as the description of the Helphen is incredibly similar to that of Hell, and serves a similar function as Valhalla in the Prose Edda, and powerful warriors are guided to a specific location in the Helphen to perhaps one day be summoned to fight again. Hell is described as being freezing cold, arguably colder than Niflheim, though in some sources Helheim and Niflheim are considered the same location or parts of the same region. Valhalla means Hall of the Fallen, and I don't think it too big a stretch to say that there is perhaps some equivalent to Valhalla in the Helphen, as the Helphen steeple specifically says only those who die in battle are guided by the Red Grace, which suggests they live within a region of the Helphen separate from those who died natural deaths. Though, in Norse mythology, the warriors were actually chosen directly by Odin and his Valkyries to live on in Valhalla among the gods, as Valhalla is actually a part of Asgard. Moreover, the purpose of selecting warriors to remain in Valhalla is so the gods can recruit legendary warriors to fight alongside them during the end of days, Ragnarok. Thus, it makes me wonder why those who die in battle are chosen to be guided by the red grace of the Helphen, because if particular people are chosen to walk a specific path in the Helphen, and perhaps themselves reach the black tree that supposedly resides there, why is it happening? And who, if anyone, does it benefit? My thoughts on this are that I believe there to be an outer god residing in the Helphen, and this could perhaps have been one of the factors that led Marika to shatter the Elden Ring and hide away destined death with Malekith. If people are no longer allowed to enter the Helphen, even those who have died in battle, it would stand to reason that this would benefit Marika and her god, the Greater Will, more than it would benefit the god in the control of the Helphen. While simply speculation, I would not find it too surprising to learn that Marika was fearful of the other outer gods, and perhaps was most afraid of the outer god ruling the Helphen. While I don't have much evidence other than the color red being associated with summoning undead warriors, this could be connected to the Formless Mother, the patron deity of Mohg, and his failed Mohgwyn dynasty. I wonder if Marika was fearful of the army that could be built in the Helphen, as people to this day have continued to be born and have continued to die, and this only increases the number of souls that are gathered in the underworld. We already know that Marika has sought to extinguish other gods who oppose the Greater Will, and perhaps sealing away the Rune of Death was a strategic move on Marika's part to prevent the god of the Helphen from accruing too much power for her to handle. This works well with how death is currently handled in the Lands Between, as death essentially does not exist without the Rune of Death and the Elden Ring, and people are forced to live long beyond their years, and become shells of the humans they once were. While this fate is a horrific one indeed, to Marika, the sacrifice may have been necessary to prevent the power from being usurped by an outer god that was accruing power as a result of Marika's conquest over other creatures and gods, namely the giants and their fell god. Moreover, blood is typically associated with death and injury, and as such, it would be somewhat fitting if the Formless Mother were the ruler of the Helphen, as we have already seen that the Formless Mother wishes to bring down the Golden Order and chose Mohg as her champion. The fact that the substance and lamplight that guides souls of the dead is said to be similar to the grace of the Lands Between, especially leads me to believe that there is an outer god in the Helphen, as grace in the Lands Between only exists because of the Greater Will. And in Norse mythology, it's said that those who dwelled in Asgard received a form of grace from Odin that was representative of communion with divinity, much like grace is seen as a communion with the Greater Will in Elden Ring. And to expand upon that, it leads me to believe that other gods in Elden Ring could produce and proliferate a similar grace-like substance that leads souls on what this god views as the correct path. Thus, the grace-like lamp in the Helphen could be representative of the Formless Mother, or another separate outer god sharing their power with the souls of dead warriors to eventually use in the decisive battle against their foes, that are perhaps Marika and the Greater Will. Just to add a little bit more to this speculation, the blood the Formless Mother produces could even be an ability she has due to living in the underworld, as her realm could be more caked in blood than the lands between, but we simply don't have enough information to make that claim definitively. To help bolster the existence of the Helphen, and perhaps to better connect it to Norse mythology, the ghostly candlewoods that can be found in various regions of the lands between are likely connected to the Helphen as well, and may also share a connection with Norse shamanism, specifically the concept of shamanic death, which involves a spiritual death and rebirth that allows one to roam the lands as a spirit and guide others to the underworld. In Elden Ring, when you come across one of the candlewoods, a frail-looking spirit will appear and lead you to a remote region, often one located underground or on the side of a cliff. The parallels are readily apparent, though the exact state of the spirits is unknown, as they could be representative of those who are undergoing a shamanic journey, or they could simply be spirits that guide the way to the underground secrets, similar to the red grace guiding those who have fallen to a specific region of the Helphen. The candlewood has a distinct spectral appearance, similar to that of a tibia mariner, as well as other spirits seen in games such as helpful ones trapped in their ashes, and this demonstrates that these spirits all take on a similar appearance, which could suggest they are all destined for the same location, the Helphen. Though, if I'm being honest, I am currently unsure as to how bones play into death in the Helphen, as there must be a reason tibia mariners are named as such, and as to why it would seem the skeletons are the preferred choice of summoning for enemies, such as the tibia mariner, with the only enemy that really calls spirits in their spectral form being the spirit-calling snails, and I honestly have no idea what's going on with those things, so that may have to be the subject of a video another day. Regardless, bones seem to play a factor in the summoning of spirits, as well as the possible destruction or transference of the spirit that occurs when the ghost flame is used to burn the bodies of the dead by the deathrite birds. Moreover, you must destroy the bones of an undead enemy to ensure that they remain dead, which, once again, points to bones being significant, though why this is, I'm not entirely sure. Now, knowing about the existence of an underworld in Elden Ring, it raises more questions about what exactly the lands between actually are, as the lands appear to have a tenuous relationship with immortality and death, and perhaps could be analogous for Asgard, the realm of the gods, or perhaps even an analog for the 9 realms of the cosmos themselves, though I would need to conduct more research to analyze those comparisons. However, currently, it would appear that there are a few items and objects in-game that point to and describe an underworld separate from the lands between, which could throw a wrench in theories that the lands between are themselves a form of underworld or spirit world, though both could still be true. The Helphen could be the underworld, and the lands between could be a separate spirit or divine realm, as there is clearly something unique about the lands between, as it is surrounded by water and a deep fog, which makes it sound quite similar to the Celtic otherworld Tirnanog. I could easily see the lamplight that guides the dead who have fallen in battle as actually being the same hue or color as the ghost flame, though this is speculation as much as the color red being the color representative of the Helphen lamplight, with the primary reason for this being the candlewoods with spirit guides found around the map. Though, I do hesitate to say the grace in the Helphen is necessarily that of a ghostly cold blue flame, as this color is more representative of the candlewood, which isn't quite the same as the other items relating to the Helphen, such as the Helphen steeple. Moreover, the ghost flame color is seen more commonly as the same color as spirits themselves, as well as that of the candlewood, whereas warriors summoned into skeletons by tibia mariners emit a red glow, which again may represent whether or not those people died in battle or of natural causes. It could perhaps be inferred that red relates to those who died in battle and entered the Helphen, whereas spirits with a blue hue may be those who died of natural causes and entered the Helphen as well, or perhaps have been barred from entering the Helphen, such as the spirits housed within the spirit ashes, as people have been unable to truly experience death in the lands between. As a result of Marika sealing away destined death, death is no longer destined, and this could perhaps put Marika at odds with the ruler of the Helphen, whether that be the Formless Mother or not, as now the natural order within the Helphen would have been thrown into turmoil, and traditions relating to the Helphen have essentially been lost, as few items even describe the existence of the underworld, which infers to me that at least traditions relating to death in the Helphen likely involved another outer god, as many traditions and outer gods were spurned by Marika and the Greater Will, as the Greater Will has imposed itself as the supreme outer god in the lands between, and the Helphen may have been obscured because of its connections to a blasphemous god, much like the removal of traditions relating to the Crucible or the Flame of the Fell God. The Helphen may be an underworld that Marika has rejected in the name of the Greater Will and its Golden Order. While there are many unanswered questions and mysteries, I hope that the Elden Ring community can come together to piece it all together eventually, as there is clearly far too much for a few people to decipher on their own. But anyway, let me know what you think about my theories and hypotheses in the comments. I'd love to hear what everyone thinks about it. I'm really excited to make more videos like this, and I'd really love to investigate more Norse, Celtic mythology and stuff like that, and pretty much anything that ends up relating to Elden Ring. So if there's anything you want me to cover, or you want me to do shorter, more in-depth videos, then I'd be willing to do that as well. I'm actually planning on doing a Dark Souls video here soon, if anyone's interested. But anyway, let me know what you think of my theories in the comments. Like and subscribe if you'd like, and make sure you're drinking water out there. Now, go forth, ye tarnished.